My parents weaponized my sister's illness to erase me from the family, so I quietly built a multi-million-dollar empire while pretending to be broke. And then Thanksgiving blew everything wide open in front of everyone. The chair scraped the floor so loud it cut through every conversation in the room. My mother was on her feet before I even registered what was happening. 20 people around that table. Aunts, uncles, cousins, my father, Lily's boyfriend Marcus. My grandmother who hadn't left her armchair in 2 years. All of them frozen, staring at the laptop screen my sister had just planted in the center of the Thanksgiving table like a grenade. You have millions, and you let us struggle. My mother's voice broke on the last word. She wasn't crying, she was furious. There's a specific kind of fury that only parents can generate, the kind that wraps itself in righteousness, that mistakes entitlement for grief. I knew that voice. I'd heard it my entire childhood, just never directed at me. I was usually too invisible to deserve it. Lily stood beside the laptop with her arms crossed, and that smirk, the one she'd been refining since she was 7 years old, pulling at the corner of her mouth. She'd walked in with my laptop and flipped the screen around to the entire dining room without a second of hesitation. She didn't look shocked, she looked satisfied, like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. The screen showed my dashboard clearly. Current balance, $47.3 million. Pending contract, $425,000. The Hong Kong auction timer still ticking in the corner. My father hadn't stood up yet. He was just staring at the numbers like they were written in a language he couldn't parse. I set down my fork, I picked up my wine glass, and took one slow sip. I looked at my mother, I looked at Lily, and then I said very quietly, "Actually, Mom, I own one of the largest jewelry authentication companies in the country. I have for the past 6 years." The room didn't make a sound. My grandmother said softly from her armchair in the corner, "Well, good for you, Taylor." Nobody else spoke. My mother's face went through 4 distinct expressions in about 3 seconds. Then she pointed at me across the table and said, "You have some explaining to do," but not the kind she meant. I should back up. I was 9 years old the first time I understood that I had been sorted into a category, and the category was less important, not worthless, not hated. Just clearly, demonstrably, second. The way you rank preferences without announcing it. The way a household operates according to an unspoken priority list that every single person in it understands but no one will ever say out loud. It was 3 a.m, a Tuesday in late October. I remember the cold coming under my bedroom door before I heard the knock. My Aunt Carol, still in her coat. "Pack a bag, Taylor. Mom's at the hospital." My sister Lily arrived 2 months premature on October 23rd, 1995. And on that same night, I was packed into a duffel bag and handed off like a liability. I didn't blame anyone for that. Emergencies are emergencies. What I blamed them for came later. Lily came home to a house transformed. Industrial-grade bleach smell in every room. Hand sanitizer dispensers mounted on the walls. Actual wall-mounted dispensers like a hospital. A color-coded schedule on the refrigerator that governed every movement in the house. And me relegated to a rotating list of relatives every time I showed the smallest symptom of anything. A runny nose, a cough. One time I sneezed twice and my father had his car keys out before I finished the second sneeze. At first, I genuinely didn't mind. Grandma Rose baked the best oatmeal cookies I've ever eaten in my life and let me stay up past 10 watching old movies. But then I was 9, and then I was 10, and I slowly understood that this wasn't a temporary arrangement. My parents weren't managing a crisis. They were managing a preference. I tried everything a child tries. Straight A's every semester, science fair trophies, I won 3rd at the district level in 6th grade with a project on water purification. I memorized 10 poems in Spanish because I'd overheard my father say once, idly, that he wished he'd learned another language. I set the table without being asked. I washed dishes before breakfast. I learned to be the child who required nothing. My father's response to my Spanish recitation was, "Don't practice so close to Lily. Your breath and saliva travel when you speak." I was 11. That landed somewhere it never fully left. The piano incident happened when I was 13. I'd spent 4 months teaching myself from a library book and a secondhand keyboard I bought with birthday money. $43, a Casio with sticky keys, and a broken sustain pedal. I practiced in my room with headphones on so the sound wouldn't bother anyone. I learned Bridge Over Troubled Water completely by ear, note for note, because we didn't have money for sheet music, and the library only had 2 piano books, and neither had that song. I performed it at the school talent show in March, 6th from last. I didn't tell my parents when it was. I just left the flyer on the kitchen counter for a week. The night of the show, I sat down at the keyboard in a gymnasium that smelled like industrial cleaner and basketball rubber, and I played. I played it cleanly. I played it the way I'd practiced it 200 times in my room with the headphones on. And I looked out at the audience and I found my family's section. I'd told them where to sit, and there were 3 empty seats. 2 weeks later, every single person in our extended family showed up for Lily's recorder recital. 45 minutes long, she played 4 songs, both sets of grandparents, my Uncle Dennis who had driven up from Columbus, cousins I hadn't seen in a year. My parents sat in the front row. I stayed home that night. I sat in my room with my Casio keyboard and I played Bridge Over Troubled Water one more time, alone, and I cried once. Quickly, and then I stopped. Lily had been medically cleared by the time she was 8. Her immune issues were real. I'm not disputing that. But by 3rd grade, she was healthy. By 4th grade, she was in soccer. By 5th grade, she was doing sleepovers and birthday parties and eating at friends' houses without a single incident. The infrastructure of the household had been built around her fragility, and when the fragility disappeared, nobody dismantled the infrastructure. They just redirected it. If Lily didn't want to go to school, she had a headache. My mother called in and made it happen. If Lily had a big exam, my mother called the teacher and asked for an extension. If there was a chore Lily found unpleasant, I was quietly assigned to cover it, never announced. Just expected. I stopped fighting for their attention around age 14. I retreated to my room, which my parents had given up trying to enter once Lily declared she was allergic to vanilla and I'd started burning a vanilla candle every single night. The allergy was not real. Lily has never had a documented allergy to anything, but it gave me 30 square feet of uncontested privacy, and I treated that privacy like oxygen. My room had floor-to-ceiling bookshelves my father had built for Lily's nursery, and then moved to my room when she outgrew them. I filled them completely: history, chemistry, literature, and eventually antiques. I found a battered copy of Miller's Antiques Handbook at a garage sale when I was 15, and I read it cover to cover 3 times. Then I found its companion volume, then a specialized text on estate jewelry authentication, then another one. I started going to flea markets on Saturday mornings, buying pieces for $2 or $3, researching them, reselling them on eBay for $12 or $15. By junior year, I'd cleared almost $900 that way, which I kept in a savings account my parents didn't know existed. They weren't watching me, nobody was. And it turns out that invisibility, deployed correctly, is an extraordinary asset. I worked at Murphy's Diner on Route 9, 22 hours a week during the school year, full-time in summers. I joined debate team, National Honor Society, the school paper. Debate team was where everything clicked. I was good at it in a way that felt different from being good at school. It required not just knowing things, but constructing arguments in real time, reading the room, staying calm under pressure. I won state my junior year and again my senior year. My parents missed both competitions. Lily had soccer games on the same weekends. She was on the C squad and rarely played. Junior year, I registered for the SAT. I prepped using library resources and one used Kaplan book with highlighted sections from whoever owned it before me. October 12, 2002. I sat in a beige classroom at Westview High and worked through every section methodically, the way I'd trained myself to work. Quietly, alone, without anyone believing in me or watching. 1600. Perfect score. Less than 1% of students who take the exam. I ran home, I genuinely ran. I burst through the back door holding the paper about the outsiders. Mom, I got a perfect SAT score. She looked up. That's nice, honey. Keep your voice down, Lily's trying to concentrate. Lily's C+ on that English paper went on the refrigerator 2 weeks later with a magnet that said, "We're so proud," in blue letters. My SAT score was never mentioned again, not once. I applied to 15 colleges by myself. I wrote every essay alone. I secured recommendations from my debate coach and my AP chemistry teacher without telling my parents. I filed every financial aid form myself using the W-2s I'd earned from Murphy's Diner. When the acceptances came, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Northwestern. 8 others, I kept them in a fireproof lockbox under my bed. Northwestern offered a full scholarship. Tuition, room, board, books, a small living stipend, everything. The night I found out, my parents took the family to Olive Garden to celebrate Lily making the junior varsity cheerleading squad. I wasn't invited or disinvited. I just wasn't mentioned. I heated up a box of mac and cheese in the microwave and ate it standing over the kitchen sink and read my Northwestern acceptance letter one more time. I left for Evanston, Illinois in August, $2,300 in savings. I said goodbye to my parents at the kitchen table. My mother hugged me briefly. My father shook my hand. Lily was still asleep. I want to be careful here because I know how this sounds. I know people read stories like this and they expect me to say my parents were monsters. They weren't. They were people who had a sick child and organized their world around her, and then couldn't stop organizing their world around her even after the reason was gone. That's a failure of attention and a failure of self-awareness. It's not malice. Most damage isn't malice, it's just people operating on default settings they never stopped to question. But the damage was real. Northwestern was the first place I had ever felt like a person with full dimensions. I had professors who remembered my name. I had a roommate, Priya, who asked me questions about myself and actually waited for the answers. I had debate competitions and library nights, and eventually an internship at a small estate sale company in Chicago that handled high-end jewelry collections. That internship became 2 internships. The second one was with a private appraisal firm in River North. The senior appraiser there, a man named Gordon Marsh, took me seriously in a way that still surprises me when I think about it. He taught me GIA grading methodology by hand. He let me sit in on client meetings. By my senior year, I was doing authenticated appraisals he trusted enough to put his own signature adjacent to. I graduated in 2007. Gordon offered me a full-time position. I took it. I worked there for 4 years, learning everything, billing quietly at rates that were building me a name in certain circles. By 2011, I had enough of a client list and enough capital to incorporate my own firm, Taylor Renner Authentication, LLC. Filed in Illinois. I was 25 years old and I had $31,000 in a business account, and one very good client who needed authenticated documentation for a jewelry collection worth approximately $2.2 million. The business grew the way real businesses grow, slowly, then not slowly at all. I hired a second appraiser in 2013, a third in 2014. We opened a New York office in 2015 because 2 clients in Manhattan were paying for my flights, so often it was cheaper to just be there. Boston in 2017. By 2019, we were doing 7-figure contracts on a quarterly basis. The company valuation put us north of $40 million. My family knew I worked in antiques. That was all they knew. Every Sunday dinner, I went home for them. Because I was still trying, still hoping for something I couldn't name. I wore deliberate clothes, not expensive ones. My closet was full of Prada and Armani, but I drove home in a 7-year-old Subaru I kept specifically for this purpose, and I wore plain jeans and a flannel shirt. And I told them business was fine, things were okay, it was a small company, but I was managing. My mother would nod and then redirect the conversation to Lily, who was working in entry-level marketing at a mid-sized firm in Cincinnati and treating it like she'd been named CEO. My father would nod and watch the game. I would eat the pot roast, overcooked, always, every single time, and I would keep my secret like a held breath. I am not entirely proud of this. There was something in it beyond strategy. There was something in it that was punishment, or a test, or both. I wanted to know who they were when they thought I had nothing. I wanted to see if that ever changed. It never changed. And I kept showing up anyway every Sunday, watching my mother's face light up when Lily walked in, watching it do nothing particular when I walked in. Here's where I need to tell you about Lily's March. 14 months before Thanksgiving, my mother called me on a Thursday night. Crying, she said Lily had been let go from her job. She said Lily was behind on rent. She said my father's hours had been reduced and they were stretched thin. She asked if I could help. She asked in the specific way she always asked me, like she was asking a stranger for directions, not like she was asking her daughter for anything. Technically polite, fully transactional. I said I'd think about it. I called Lily, not my mother, Lily, and I asked her to walk me through what happened. Lily said her company had downsized. She said it wasn't her fault. She said she needed about $3,200 to cover rent for 2 months while she figured things out. She said it in the same tone she'd used to ask our parents for things our entire childhood. Not requesting, not explaining. Stating. I asked her how she was doing, actually doing, emotionally. She paused for a beat and then said she was fine. She just needed the money. I sent her $3,200. I sent it that night. I called my mother back and told her I'd taken care of it. There was a silence on the line. Then my mother said, "Oh, I thought you said your shop was doing okay but not great." "It is," I said. I had some savings. I can trace the entire shape of Thanksgiving back to that moment. That was the crack in the wall. My mother's voice when she said it, that specific hesitation, she knew something was off. She filed it somewhere and she let it sit. And for 14 months, every Sunday dinner, I watched her watching me a little differently than she had before. Just slightly, just enough. 4 Sundays before Thanksgiving, Lily called me. Not to thank me for the $3,200, that thank you had arrived as a 2-line text in April. She called because she'd gotten a new job and she wanted me to know. I said congratulations. She said the salary was $48,000 and she'd negotiated it herself. I said that was great. She didn't ask how I was. Not once. I hung up the phone and I sat for a moment in my actual office, the Chicago office, the real one, with the glass conference table and the DeGay sketch on the wall and the 12 authentication specialists in the adjacent room. And I thought, I am going to tell them soon. I don't know what I'm waiting for. I've been waiting for something to make it feel like the right time, and I think I've been wrong about what that moment looks like. I didn't choose Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving chose me. I organized the catering as I had for the past 3 years. Quietly. My parents believed the food was potluck from various family members because I'd worked it out with my Aunt Carol, who knew more than anyone else about my real situation and had kept the secret with extraordinary loyalty. The wine on the table retailed at $62 a bottle. My family assumed it was from the discount grocery store 2 towns over. 22 people. My parents' house, which I'd quietly paid the property taxes on for the past 2 years through an arrangement my Aunt Carol managed. A full table. Real food. And me, slipping away to my old bedroom at around 4:15 because a client in Hong Kong had bid on a piece of Georgian estate jewelry, and I needed to be available if the bid cleared. I didn't lock the door. That was the mistake. Or maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe by then some part of me was done hiding. I heard Lily behind me before I saw her. So what's the important work that's more important than Thanksgiving dinner? I turned and she was already reading the screen. Her eyes moved across the numbers twice. I watched the smirk form, slow and complete and utterly familiar. Let's see what Taylor's up to. She didn't say it to me. She picked up the laptop and walked out the door before I could stand up. By the time I reached the dining room, she had the screen turned toward the entire table. My mother laughed first. Actually laughed. A short sound, almost a bark. Because surely it was a mistake. Surely the numbers on that screen were someone else's numbers. I walked to my seat. I stood behind my chair. I looked at the screen and then at my mother and I said quietly and clearly, "That's my company's dashboard. I've been running one of the largest independent jewelry authentication firms in the country for the past 6 years. We have offices in Chicago, New York, and Boston." My mother stopped laughing. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard. My Uncle Dennis looked at the table. Marcus, Lily's boyfriend, looked at Lily. My grandmother, Grandma Rose, 81 years old, in the armchair by the window, said with complete composure, "Well, good for you, Taylor," and then went back to her sweet potatoes. My mother stood up. Chair scraped. That sound. "You have millions and you let us struggle?" I let her finish. She went on for about 40 seconds. She hit the major points. I had money. They had hard times. How could I? Didn't I care about family? Didn't she raise me? Lily needed help. They needed help. What kind of daughter? She ran out of words eventually. They always do. "You didn't struggle, Mom," I said. "Your property taxes have been paid for 2 years. I sent Lily $3,200 in April. I've sent you and Dad money for car repairs for the water heater last January, for Dad's medical copays twice. All of it came from me, through Aunt Carol." My mother's mouth opened and closed. Aunt Carol, across the table, had her hands folded and was looking at the centerpiece. She didn't look guilty, she looked relieved. "You've been getting help from me for years," I said. "You just didn't know it was me. You thought it was Aunt Carol's savings, or a family fund, or luck. I let you think that because I needed to see, whether knowing it was me would have made any difference, whether it would have changed anything." My father finally spoke. "Taylor, I'm not done," I said. He went quiet. "I've been showing up every Sunday for years in clothes I bought specifically so you wouldn't ask questions. I sat at this table and listened to Lily's job updates and watched her get the birthday toasts and the refrigerator magnets and the calls when things went wrong. And I never said anything because saying something felt like asking for something. And I stopped asking for things in this family when I was about 8 years old." Lily made a sound. Not a word. A sound. "I'm not angry," I said. And I meant it mostly. "I'm telling you who I am. I should have done it years ago. That's on me." My mother sat down. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. The dinner went on. Awkwardly, painfully. But it went on. People passed the green beans. Marcus asked me, very carefully, 3 questions about authentication that were genuine and not hostile. My father ate in silence for 40 minutes, and then, while other people were getting dessert, came and stood next to me at the kitchen counter and said quietly, "I'm sorry we missed your debate competitions. Both of them." 2 sentences. 20 years overdue. I told him thank you, and I meant that too. But Lily wasn't finished. 3 days later, I got a call from my mother crying again. Lily had posted on Facebook a long post, Family Visible, about how I had secretly hoarded millions while letting our parents suffer and struggle, how I had used the family as an experiment, how my behavior was calculating and cold and designed to humiliate. 43 comments by the time my mother called. Cousins I barely spoke to weighing in. An aunt I'd always liked calling it unforgivable. I read the post once, I didn't respond to it. I called my attorney that afternoon, not for legal action, just to have a conversation about what, if anything, required documentation. She said nothing did yet, but to keep records. I kept records. Over the following 3 weeks, the family split in the way families do. Not cleanly, not along the lines I expected. My Aunt Carol posted a calm, factual rebuttal to Lily's post, detailing without dollar amounts but with clear implication the assistance I'd been quietly providing for years. 3 cousins messaged me privately to say they believed me. My Uncle Dennis, who I'd never been especially close to, called to say he'd always suspected I was doing better than I let on and that he respected the privacy. Lily doubled down twice on social media and then went quiet. Marcus, to his credit, sent me a brief text saying he thought the whole situation had been handled badly and he was sorry. I thanked him. My mother and I didn't speak for 6 weeks. When she finally called, she didn't apologize directly. She said she'd been thinking, and she said she realized she didn't know me very well, and she said that was something she regretted. It's not the apology I would have written for her, but it was real, and I accepted it. My father called the week after she did. He asked if he could visit me in Chicago. I said yes. He came in January, stayed 2 nights in my actual apartment, saw the actual office, met 2 of my actual employees. We had dinner at a restaurant near the river, and he ordered the salmon and didn't say much. And at one point, he looked out at the water and said, "You built something real." Just that? I said yes. He said, "I'm proud of you," the second time he'd ever said those words to me. I was 34 years old. Lily and I haven't spoken since Thanksgiving. Not from active hostility on my end. I left the door open. She knows where I am. Some people, when they're unmasked, need time to figure out who they are without the performance. I don't know if she'll figure it out. I don't know if I'm part of her life going forward. I've stopped waiting for something from her I was never going to get. Here's what I know now. The invisibility they gave me was the greatest advantage I ever had, and I will never forgive them for it, and I will never stop being grateful for it, And both of those things are true at the same time, and will probably always be. I built my life in the gaps they left. In the room they didn't enter. In the space between piano recitals nobody attended. And acceptance letters in a lockbox under a bed. I built it out of neglect, which is not nothing. Neglect is material if you know how to use it. The table is still there. The overcooked pot roast is probably still happening. I still show up sometimes, less regularly than before, in better clothes now because there's no longer a reason to hide. Lily's seat at the table has a different energy around it, tighter, more careful. And my grandmother still asks me questions and waits for the answers, which she has always done. My company closed a $12 million consulting contract last spring. I have 31 employees. I sit on an advisory board for a graduate program in material culture at the University of Chicago. I am, by any reasonable measure, fine. But there is something I lost in that dining room, even as I gained everything else. I lost the last of the waiting. The part of me that had been waiting, since I was 9 years old and sitting in the back of Aunt Carol's car with a duffel bag, for someone in my family to finally look up and see me. That waiting is gone now. They've seen me. They know who I am. And somehow, that knowledge which I wanted my entire life lands quieter than I expected. You build the empire so someone will finally look. And then they look, and you realize the looking was never going to be enough. What you needed was for them to have looked earlier, when it still would have changed something. When I was sitting alone at the piano at 11 o'clock at night with $43 of sticky keys and a song I'd learned by myself for an audience that never showed, that's what Thanksgiving blew open. Not the money, not the secret. The question I'd been carrying since I was 9, did I matter? I know the answer now. I just wish I'd stopped needing them to tell me.